Hey, welcome to Northpointe Plus. We're excited you're hanging out with us today on episode 131.
131.
Yeah, Rick, what was life like 131 years ago?
Let's see.
Northpointe was still around.
Northpointe existed at that point in time.
184?
Yeah, 184. Yeah. So 131 years ago would be like what? 19.
I could do the math, but I'm just going to wait on you.
Yeah, 1893 or something like that. 1894.
All right.
Crazy.
You know what was invented in 1893?
The cotton gin.
I have no idea. So
I don't
will
know.
you look that up for us? Actually, we're gonna bring that back later in the podcast. Sylvia's gonna look that up.
1893.
Yeah.
The Roaring 90s.
The Roaring 90s.
That's what they were called.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
No, the Roaring 20s.
Roaring 20s, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is gold podcasting
Yes.
as we're talking about what was happening 131 years ago.
Hey, just for whatever it's worth, I got a game that's called Chronology.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting game. It has all these cards and it has an event, and you have to put them in order, in chronological order of when they happened.
Well, that's kind of cool.
So it's kind of easy, like if you have Nero burning Rome, and then the invention of the telegraph. But if you have like 5 events that are all within 5 or 6 years,
it's tough.
it's much more difficult.
That's
Chronology.
fun.
Yeah, we might play that as a staff.
There you go.
Staff
lunch.
Yeah, there we
Look at
go.
Sylvia's excited. I can see her over there smiling with joy on the side as she's looking up the year 1893. Do you have anything? The Ferris wheel. The Ferris wheel
was invented in 1893.
That's so much better than I expected.
That's why you tuned in today.
Wow.
To learn that fact.
Nice. Well, that was a fun 2 minutes to start this podcast. How about we
Good.
get into what we're actually here for, right? So,
go ahead.
I was gonna say we're continuing our unexpected series leading into Easter, right?
Yes, we are.
And
Easter's only a few weeks away.
I know, that's crazy how fast it is this year.
And several people have mentioned it. We announced it yesterday, but we are having a Good Friday service.
Yeah.
It's 7 o'clock on Good Friday, and that's going to be great. This will be, I think, the 3rd year in a row that we've done it.
Yeah.
And it's every year it's just been incredibly meaningful. So plan on being a part of that.
Yeah. Then 3 Easter services: 8:30, 9:45, and 11 o'clock.
Yes.
And then we'll have the prayer boards back up again for the prayer walk here on property, the Holy Week, the week before leading into. So if that's something anybody wants to be a part of, feel free. Come on property, do that your own pace, own style. We'll have it. I think this year we're going to do it coming up the driveway. So we did it in front. We've done it in the back. We're going to do it kind of coming up.
Oh, nice. So like you can even stay in your car.
So you could stay in your car if you wanted to.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, Janet's got good ideas. And I said, let's do it, Janet.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, should be fun. But so you talked yesterday or 2 days ago, since this comes out on Tuesday.
Yeah, on Sunday.
Right? On Sunday, there you go, about feeding the 5,000. So tell us a little more about that.
Well, before we get there,
Yeah.
how's it feel to be the official
Oh, we're going to go there right now?
lead pastor designate or whatever?
Yeah, weird. It's weird to sit in the back of that room and like hear your own story and have been a part of the process and like the memories and everything rolling around in your noggin, right? Trying to figure that out. Did I tell your story okay? You did good, man. You did good. And, I think you probably portrayed Ashley and I as a little bit more with it and faithful on the so they just sold their house. And it was like, no, there was a lot of tension going into that.
I can't
moment.
imagine. How long did you own that house?
So we, when you buy the house, you put your first mortgage payment down.
Yep.
Right. So you don't pay your first mortgage till the second month that you're in the house.
Right.
We hadn't paid that by the time that you contacted us. So we bought it in like June or July of that year and sold it. We got a phone call coming up to Lansing to spend Thanksgiving with her family. So the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, we got accepted offer and like everything over the phone on our drive up. And it had only been on the market for 2 days, I think, or a day or two at that point in time. So super cool. Really loved it. I barely have memories of the house, to be honest, because it was like
everybody has stories about their first house.
Yeah,
and you'll say, we lived someplace for a few weeks.
Yeah, I remember we were watching the Ohio State Michigan game, and we were hosting it at our house. And our realtor called, and she said, "Hey, the inspector's coming today and take a look at your house." And I said, "Well, I have a watch party going on right now." And she's like, "Haha, really funny." I'm like, "No, I literally have a watch party going on at my house. Like, I can't leave. I'm not going to leave my house. So they did the inspection as we're like watching.
No
the game.
kidding.
Yeah.
The one thing I remember about that house talking to you, didn't you have a room that was like half Ohio State and half Michigan State?
Yeah, the office. We did that.
Yeah, you split it
We
halfway.
split it with Ashley and I. There was goofy stuff. That house actually had a shed in the back that we didn't know until after buying the house. We were like, oh, cool, it's a shed. One of the doors was missing. We'll fix that. No big deal. We were talking with our new neighbors, and they're like, oh, yeah, that's where they kept the pigeons. Like, the what? I said, yeah, the people that lived here beforehand, they had that shed. They would breed pigeons, like carrier pigeons in there. I hadn't even gone in the shed yet. And I was
wow.
like, I don't actually think I ever went in the shed because at that point in time, I was like, I don't know what kind of diseases or what. I'm not storing anything in there. We're not messing with pigeon shed.
We'll just let that convey with the house.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if we had to disclaim that or whatever, but when we sold it.
That's interesting.
But weird pigeon carrier shed in that house. That's one of my memories of that place. But yeah, so excited. Like, we're excited about all of it, obviously. It's been fun. It's been fun conversations with staff and you and Deb for years now about this whole thing.
Yeah.
It has been quite the journey and quite the fun stuff. I can even remember being in Africa having conversations.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And plane rides and chatting at that point in time about stuff.
Yeah.
So it's been a journey. We still got a journey to go. It's exciting to see what God is doing over this next over a year season of kind of all the things that we've dreamed about together to be able to do.
Right.
And then beyond as eldership and you and I still talking and things like that. So it's an exciting season, I would say.
Yeah, I do think it's helpful if you're watching and like this is all still kind of new.
Yeah.
We've had, Jake said this morning, this is like the best kept.
The worst kept secret, intentionally.
The worst kept secret ever because we've been talking about it pretty openly, really very openly for 3 years.
Yeah.
But we initially started having the conversation 5 years ago. So yeah.
And nobody booed when you said it. So that's a good thing, right?
That
was a good thing. I was trying to listen for any of that. No, nothing. So
yeah. So you can email boo to boo.
Yeah. You can submit that in your question, right? For the Q&A we got coming up.
To boo.
Yeah, are we still allowed to anytime you want? Boo away. Not a problem.
Yeah.
Man, but yeah, let's talk a little bit about the rest of Sunday and your talk there in John 6. You're talking about feeding the 5,000. We had some cool baptisms as well. I'd like to chat about that at some point in time.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that first before we get into it?
Let's do. I just think it's such a cool thing. I want to talk about it a little bit because for anybody when they follow Jesus, their life, if they're serious about it, their life changes.
Yeah.
And that creates conversations and that impacts the people around them. And so it's just what I wanted to do in kind of setting up the baptism yesterday was to just say Avery's story is not just Avery's story. Mm-hmm. Avery's story is Nevaeh's story. Nevaeh's story is Abby Toner and Wilder's story. Wilder's story is not just Wilder's story; it's Morgan and Sammy and Stacy's story. Yeah. And their story isn't separated even from the loss of the kid's grandma, Stacy's mother-in-law, Diane. And that's just cool. It's cool. As I was talking about it and then thinking through the message, in the message I talked about God takes a little and does a lot, and God does unexpected things that we can't imagine. And so much of the time when we experience loss, when somebody that we love dies, we just think this is the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
And yet God can use that to change us and to change other people's lives, and to know that in a weird kind of chain of events, Avery's life is being changed, Nevaeh's life is being changed by Jesus, but that Diane's death was a start of that process. There was a piece in there. So yeah, cool stuff.
Yeah, it reminds me of the series we did, Crooked Sticks, Drunk Straight Out with Crooked Sticks. It's that similar concept of like, God takes the broken to make the beautiful, and moments that we don't expect, right?
Right.
Always doing things that are unexpected to be able to make it come to fruition is such a cool thing. I love the fact too of seeing so many teenagers getting baptized right now. It
is. It's just really cool to see, how God's working in different segments. So Jenna said at the preteen event that they had a couple of weeks ago, I think they had 37 kids there, something like that. 9 of the kids are interested in giving their lives to Jesus.
Yeah.
And so that's an area that we haven't seen yet as a church to see what's going to happen with that. But then this group of teens that just where God is working, and it's really funny because as a church, we've not had a big presence at Bath High School, and now God's just opening that up, and so that's cool. And then lots of stuff going on with adults. Talked to somebody else yesterday that a mom that has some teenagers that said, "Boy, we've been talking about this, and this is a step that we all want to take together too." So,
love it.
Yeah.
I love it. In the midst of all those baptisms, I got to baptize Chad Howard.
Yeah.
Threw his back out or something like that. Apparently had to go to the chiropractor. So I don't know how many more baptisms I'll get asked to do here for a while. But it's fun, man. Baptisms are great. We love it. We love it. All right, so let's move on then.
Okay.
And let's actually talk about
the message.
The message at this point in time. So give us a little recap what you talked about, John chapter 6, feeding the 5,000.
Yeah, Jesus, in the context of unexpected, just a whole lot of things that I think when people came to see Jesus that day, the last thing they thought about that was that they were going to experience a miracle, that they were going to participate in a miracle. It was going to touch them directly, and that Jesus would feed all those people. So there was, the scripture says, 5,000 men there, and one of the other gospel writers says, besides women and children. So there were a lot of people, 15, 20,000 people, maybe as many as 25,000. And Jesus, they found a little boy that had 5 loaves and 2 fish, 5 barley loaves, John tells us. And Jesus thanked God for that little bit and then multiplied it. And everybody fed, went away fully hungry, not fully hungry, fully fed, not hungry anymore. And just a really, really cool story. Yeah.
There's something that always pops in my mind. That many people.
Yep.
And it just doesn't quite seem logical that only one little boy had food. But only one little boy stepped up with food.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So could you imagine being the guy who was like, no, I got my sandwich, but it was really only for me or my family. I'm not going to give that up. I'm not going to spread my little bit that I have and give that up. I'm going to provide for my own here. And then to see Jesus do this miracle with a child who was willing to give all that he had to be able to be used, like, man, that would make me feel like, uh-oh.
It's interesting because there's a pretty famous commentator, a guy named J.W. McGarvey, that says that this miracle was not a miracle of multiplication, but it was a miracle of sharing. And so his perspective is that when Jesus blessed those 5 loaves and 2 fish and began to break them apart, that as they began to pass that out, that all of a sudden everybody else who was holding their stuff back began to share it. And so it was a miracle of sharing. The only problem with that is that doesn't jive at all with what the 4 gospel writers say.
Right.
Because they're very clear that that's all there was. Jesus prayed, blessed it, multiplied it. They just kept passing stuff out. And when you get to the end and they actually say, what's in the baskets that are left over, it's barley loaves and fish, little pieces of fish. Yeah. So it's not like, oh yeah, I brought a hamburger too, and there's some hamburger. No, it was that. And if you think about it, 20,000 people that participate in that miracle. When the gospel writers wrote that, if they would have said, oh yeah, Jesus did that supernaturally, there would have been people who said, no. I had a fish sandwich too. I shared it. So did my brother Jim. So did Uncle John, who was there. There would have been a multitude of people from a multitude of places who could have said, that's not true.
Right.
And that didn't happen. It's really only since McGarvey, only in the last couple hundred years, that people have said, oh, maybe it was a miracle of sharing. But it wasn't. Jesus supernaturally multiplied what the little boy gave.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely crazy to me to think that in a group of 25,000 people, 20,000 people, one boy brings 5 little loaves 5 crackers, 5 whatever, and a couple of fish. It's like saying, oh yeah, we're going to take all the people who are at Breslin for Michigan State's game, and we won't talk about Michigan State's game again this podcast. We're looking at Sylvia over in the corner. Taking all those people who are at Breslin and saying, wait, no one even brought a bag of Skittles?
Yeah.
It's hard to comprehend. So, yeah.
Man, so cool. So cool. I love it. So I guess, is there one of the questions I'm just kind of looking through here a little bit that we have, is there a parallel to God feeding the nation of Israel in the wilderness? This kind of caught my attention here a little bit.
Yeah.
Explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's funny in when you read what commentators have written and just thinking through the big picture in terms of the history of how God has worked. I didn't talk about this in the message at all, that everybody who's there is Jewish. Mm-hmm. Jesus is a Jewish teacher, and they know Israel's history. And so when the nation of Israel is wandering in the wilderness and there isn't anything to eat, all of a sudden God supernaturally provides for them manna from heaven, and then quail that they can eat as well. God did it. God provided for them. He met their needs. And it's interesting, there is a parallel that Jesus then provides for this group of people, this large group of people who are hungry. He provides for them bread and meat in the same way that Moses did. And so it is really interesting that Jesus then later says, I'm the bread of life. And I think when he said that, the disciples, the people who had been there, are going, oh, wow, yeah, he multiplied that bread. He's the bread of life. Wow, that's really interesting. And I think there's a foreshadowing too when Jesus says about communion, one day we'll eat this together, that John then writes about the wedding feast that will happen in heaven, where God provides the food for us at that. There's just a lot of neat parallels that are kind of interwoven in Jesus feeding the 5,000 and then later the 4,000 in a second miracle as well. Yeah,
and you kind of see that all throughout the Gospels and really all throughout Scripture. There's no throwaway text in the Bible, right? Like it's there for a reason. It's there for a purpose. It foreshadows something to come. It calls back something that maybe happened in the Old Testament to kind of weave this thread that is Jesus throughout the entirety of the Bible. And you can see how it connects in so many ways, of Moses connecting to this moment with Jesus, which connects all the way down to, eternity and all of that kind of stuff. It's a very interesting thing, and I think just adds more to the credibility of Scripture, right?
Yeah, there's a book that we encouraged people. I can't remember if we gave it away for Easter a couple of years ago, called Cold Case Christianity.
Oh yeah.
And the writer in that, so the guy who wrote it was a detective who looked at the events of the resurrection to try and disprove them based on the testimony of the recorded witnesses. And in his book, he actually talks about the feeding of the 5,000 and verifying the reality of this event, of this miracle, based on internal evidence that's there in Scripture. And so I didn't refer to that, but I did some of that in just talking about Philip, that different gospel writers give different pieces, and that points to a credible depiction of what happened.
Right. It's not knocking it down that they're different. It actually creates a validity.
Because if you ask someone to say, like if you ask 5 different people to describe an event that they all see firsthand, they're all going to describe it differently because they see it differently. They have different values. Different things are going to matter to them. And so the fact that John says that Jesus says to Philip, where are we going to get food? That just seems like a throwaway kind of statement until you look at what the other writers say. And John, that they're in Bethsaida, and that Philip is from Bethsaida. Those are two separate references that bring credibility to the thing and makes you think, oh yeah, that's exactly why Jesus said that to Philip and not to somebody else.
Right.
It would be like
he didn't say it to the guy who has the money.
No.
Because Judas was the one carrying the money, and he didn't say, Judas, how are we going to pay for this? He said the guy who was local.
It's interesting as I'm studying the 4 different texts and looking at the wording that's there specifically. It's interesting to me that this didn't make it in the message either. It's interesting to me that that Philip's the one of the disciples says it's going to cost 8 months' wages. To go buy food so that everybody can just have a scrap. He didn't say, we don't have that much.
Right.
We don't know how much money they were carrying around to take care of their needs, to buy what they needed, to travel, to do all those kind of things. And it made me think, maybe Philip was a successful fisherman. Philip, Andrew, James, and John. Maybe they had a bankroll, and maybe they could have gone to buy it. There wasn't the resources there to be able to do it, and it was gonna bankrupt them in order to do it. We don't know that. We don't know, but it's interesting that they say this is what it's going to cost, and that's just too much for everybody to just have a bite. And then Jesus takes what's there and feeds everybody, not just with a bite, but extravagantly. That's cool.
There's something in that, like, to me, that there's even this like best laid plans kind of mentality there. That, hey, we ran the numbers, Jesus, it's going to take 8 months. And even then, like, we're not going to be able to do anything great. We're going to be able to like satisfy a little bit. We're going to quench a little bit of hunger. We can do this. Like, this is maybe all these numbers. And it's almost like they're putting the system, they're doing everything within their power to be able to make something possible or make something happen. And yet Jesus shows in that moment, no, with me, it's not about just scraping by. I can do whatever I want to do. I can bless however I want to bless. And like, to think of taking their small mindset and Jesus expanding it in that moment. Because if you're the disciples, right, like you run into these similar type situations down the road where you're going, okay, we could look into our finances to be able to pull this out and be able to do, but we also got Jesus here. And if this is what he wants done, he's going to make it happen.
Yeah. I hope, when you plan a message, you try and construct it differently depending upon what you're trying to communicate and how the text goes, that kind of thing. My hope yesterday was that we would go through the story to set it up for the crazy unexpected things at the end.
Yeah.
Because that, to me, those are really the takeaways that when you grab a hold of, it's like, oh, that can change my life. So the concept that miracles don't happen without a mess. That sounds great, but that's something that you can hold on to if you're in the middle of a mess. To think what I'm going through right now is terrible, and yet God can show his power in the midst of the terrible. Don't diss people because of their lack of planning, preparation, that kind of thing. To me, as I just kept reading the text over and over again, I kept thinking, daggone it, so many of us would say, too bad for you. You came unprepared. You didn't bring your food. Tough luck, Charlie. You need to learn a lesson. We do that as parents sometimes, that we say, no.
Natural consequences.
Natural consequences. And yet Jesus, in his compassion, he has compassion on the crowd, and he takes care of that. That sense of grace transforms people's lives. And so when people do something stupid and we still have compassion on them and reach out and help relieve that pain, that's what Jesus did. The concept, remember what God has done, not what you think he can't do, not what you haven't seen him do before.
Right.
It's just so interesting to me that the disciples in that first year and a half of ministry, whatever, had seen Jesus do incredible things. They had seen him heal people. They had seen him turn water into wine.
Right.
But they couldn't connect the dots to say, there's all these hungry people. What's Jesus going to do? And I think part of that was, again, if you go back to chapter 4, John chapter 4, when they come into Samaria, what's Jesus tell them to do? Go buy some food. So they go off to buy food. Mm-hmm. There's a need. What do? You buy the food. Mm-hmm. So there's all these people who are hungry. Oh, we don't have enough money to buy food. They couldn't connect the dots to say Jesus can take care of whatever the situation is. And man, that's so true of me. I think it's true of most all of us, that we think, oh yeah, I know that if God has done this in the past, that he can do this in the future. But if I haven't seen him do it in the past, I think, I don't. Maybe it's too big for God. And so that's a big thing. That the whole concept of give what you think's insignificant and then watch what God does with that is so much of the time. I think that we would say it's just 5 little crackers and 2 fish. It's not even worth even thinking about. It's just. I just have this ability to do XYZ, whatever that is.
Right.
God can't do anything with that. And yet God has the ability to just multiply that and have that become a ministry that touches people's lives. He has the ability to multiply that impact into all kinds of ways that we never anticipate. It's just really good stuff. And then that whole concept of the leftovers, that it's just so interesting that Jesus said, don't let those things go to waste. There's a purpose for them. We don't know from the text what that was,
right,
or how it was used, but Jesus said, no, we're not going to waste it.
Yeah.
This didn't make it in the message, but I spent some time thinking, okay, it says that the scraps were in the baskets, the 12 baskets. And I thought, I wonder what that was like. Was that like the bottom of the bag of a bag of Tostitos,
all the broken
or
up,
potato
no
chips,
good
all the stuff that nobody wants to eat, and like you're searching for the last one that's still big enough to put in the salsa, or what? Who knows? But 12 baskets, and that leads to that question that again we didn't talk about this on Sunday, but where'd the baskets come from?
Right.
Who knows? And they may not have been like, in my mind, when I say 12 basketfuls, I'm thinking baskets that are like waist high.
Right.
It's probably much more likely that that describes containers that everybody would have had with them, because you never know when you're going to need almost like a backpack, like we carry around backpacks or fanny packs for Jake.
Fanny pack is in, Rick.
There were 12 fanny packs full of scraps left over.
Yeah. In my mind, I've always pictured it as something smaller. And right, this is the text doesn't tell us, right? Mm-hmm. So this is our perception.
Yeah.
But almost the idea of like, hey, there's 12 baskets full, which is not a lot if it's a small component, like you said, like a container, sandwich container size or whatever. Almost to the idea of like, no, like Jesus met the needs.
And a little bit more.
And there was a little bit more. Like it wasn't over there. Nobody was hungry. It wasn't that he just kept on going. No, Jesus gave exactly what was needed. And then that little bit that was left over for a purpose, because Jesus said, hey, don't let those go to waste. Like even what he gave, I don't know, maybe it was somebody taken home to somebody. Maybe it was whatever that could be. But there was even a purpose for that Jesus met all of the needs appropriately, is kind of how I've read into that a little bit. That's just incredibly cool.
Yeah. I just can't imagine what it looked like, to have all these people seated in groups, Jesus breaking things, putting it in, disciples carrying it out. Jesus just keeps breaking things. I wonder if Jesus got blisters.
Yeah.
Breaking enough bread and fish for
what was the basket? Was it, if I grabbed out of the basket, was the basket shrinking? Was the basket like this unending thing? There's a story of, was it Elijah and the oil?
Yeah.
With the widow, right? She would just pour and it would continue to be full every time, no matter how much she poured out. And it met all of their needs all the way up until then. Elijah wasn't re-miracling every day kind of thing. It was just, it was there. Was that the basket? Like, we don't think we really know.
Yeah. We don't. It's like one of the things that, again, when I was studying, where did the miracle take place? Mm-hmm. Did the miracle take place as Jesus broke things? And that just kept happening. He had one piece that he broke for an hour or whatever, and then went to the second piece? Was it that, or was it that he broke some, put it in a basket, handed a basket out, picked up another fish and loaf, broke that, put it in a basket, and he just kept? Did the miracle happen in what the boy gave, in what Jesus did, or did Jesus do it and then it multiplied as the disciples passed it out to people? We don't know. And that's going to be a fun thing to in heaven say, okay, how'd you do that?
Yeah.
It's like pull the curtain back behind how'd you do that?
Yeah, you want it to be like, okay, how was the magic trick done?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yep.
Jesus like, I just provided. I just did. I just met the needs.
Just did it. I'm the bread of life.
Man, so interesting. And it's interesting because stories like this in the Bible, if you've been around church long enough, you know the ending.
Right.
Right. So it's like, it's easy to just jump to that. Oh, well, we know what happens. Jesus feeds them. Jesus feeds them. Like in your mind, you're constantly going back to that you don't always allow yourself to be in the crowd.
Yeah.
To be hungry.
Well,
you know?
and if you think about it, I wonder 20,000 people. So all 20,000 people didn't get fed at the same time.
Right.
So like if I'm at the back of the crowd, am I thinking, oh man, I picked the wrong place to sit?
Right.
Because there's never going to be enough food for me too. Yeah. And by the time it gets to me, the people in the front are saying, yeah, I could have some more. And it just keeps, you keep doing the buffet thing. I wonder if when it started, if there was unrest in the crowd, if they're going, how come those guys get it? There's not enough for everybody.
Yeah.
It's just interesting.
The human dynamics at play there. Yeah. Man.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Anything else that's you want to share? Anything else worth talking about?
Well, the verse 6 that I mentioned in the message that I wanted to talk about, it says that Jesus asked Philip that question. Where are we going to find food for all these people? Mm-hmm. He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do.
Well, that's uncomfortable, Rick.
Yeah.
Why is Jesus testing Philip?
I don't know, Jake. What do you think?
I didn't teach this one. I get a host. I get to throw the questions your way. It's a lot more fun there.
That's a dodge. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a dodge. You're right. You got to do the research. Come on.
I think it's an interesting concept because we think that's not fair.
Right.
It feels like he set him up to fail somehow. Mm-hmm. But I think that he asked the question to have them think, to have Philip, but to have everybody think through, okay, what are the options here? Mm-hmm. And at some level they failed because nobody believed that Jesus could do what he was. Nobody even had a concept that was there. Jesus knew what he was going to do.
Right.
But he knew, Jesus knew that if they were invested in trying to figure out an answer, the magnitude, the impact that that was going to happen in their life was going to be greater. Mm-hmm. It's like, it really is. A teacher can give a student a problem, and can solve that problem on the blackboard, and the student says, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. I can do that." Until the teacher gives the student their own problem, and then says, "Okay, you solve it."
Right.
They test the student to see if they've learned the concepts.
Right.
And sometimes the student can do it, sometimes not. I think that there's application in that for us, that Jesus asks the question so that they're engaged, so that they really, really get the impact of what's going on. It wasn't to make them look stupid. It wasn't to show them up. It wasn't. Right. It was to help them in the process.
Well, we have a pretty Western idea of testing, right? Like standardized testing. It's pass, fail. It's the SATs. It's the ACTs.
Yeah.
It's the final exams of what is your knowledge? Are you good enough? And yet, for the history of the world, when it comes to teaching, testing was a teaching tool. It wasn't an evaluation tool. It was a teaching tool.
Yes.
Because I expected you to already know the things that I've given you. Now when I give you a test, it's to give you something to think outside of your box and apply those principles.
Right.
And I think that's what Jesus is doing here with Philip. It's not a pass-fail thing. He's still teaching him in this moment by utilizing testing in what is a pretty first century Eastern schooling kind of method, as opposed to what we have with our are standardized teaching methods that we have in our school systems that we're used to. So when we read testing there, our mindset goes to, well, that's not fair, Jesus.
Yeah.
How would he ever know that? You haven't given him the answers to then test him to see if it's a pass-fail. Whereas Jesus is saying, no, I'm giving the test as a teaching method. This isn't a pass-fail thing. I'm teaching you through this because you've seen me do miracles in the past. Do you recognize I can do miracles now? Yeah. Are you taking that same principle and applying it to new problems? And that's just a different way of teaching that was much more first century scholarly type of thing. Socrates, Plato, all of those kinds of mentalities. It's just different than we have today in our schooling system. So it's hard for us, I think, to grasp that concept of testing, even all the way back to Job with the idea of testing, right? We have such a negative connotation with testing because it's a pass-fail as opposed to a teaching mechanism.
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah. Here's a vocabulary word for you.
Yeah.
It was a peripatetic.
Ooh.
Peripatetic.
Sylvia, I want you to write that down because I'm going to use that for Hangman later on.
Peripatetic actually, that actually works pretty well. And anyway, peripatetic means that you teach as you go, that it teaches you walk. But just your description reminded me of when I was teaching at Ozark Christian College, when I was teaching at a college level. I had come out of ministry for 17 years, and I'm teaching music ministry students how to be a music minister. And so I go into this college setting thinking, I've got to equip them to be able to do ministry when they finish here. And so the way that I tested was we would talk about concepts and principles that impacted the way that you did ministry. And my tests were almost always, here's a situation, what do you do?
Yeah.
So you have to know the principles, you have to know the concepts, and then you have to apply them in that particular setting. Well, that's just a monster to grade. You know, there was another guy on staff who all of his tests were Scantron. So they got a Scantron sheet, take your pencil, go through, A, B, C, D, whatever it is, true, false, he never had to. He probably spent 10 minutes recording grades off the Scantron, and I'm spending hours for like a fraction of the number of students. But that testing, for me, coming out of 17 years of ministry, it was so critical because you can't do ministry unless you know how to take principles and apply them to real life situations, because stuff's going to happen, and you've got to figure out how to do that. And if you know, this is the key signature for the key of A. Mm-hmm. That's good. That doesn't help you a lot when there's a crisis. Right. So Jesus, the whole testing thing was it was a great. I just think that it's fun. I think that Jesus probably said, Philip, where are we going to find food? He knew what he was going to do. Yeah. But he wanted Philip engaged. Yeah.
I love it. As we wrap up, anything coming up, anything else? We already talked about Easter. We got egging happening here soon.
We do.
I'm
actually looking at my notes to make sure that I talked about everything I wanted to talk about.
I want to talk about egging real quick because we've got the next 2 Sundays coming up. We kind of talked about it a little bit. Bob had his daughter up on stage. Nice. That was a lot of fun this Sunday. But we'll have a couple stations coming up this coming Sunday, and then on Palm Sunday for people to come, grab a bag, grab a yard sign, go egg their neighbors, put the sign in there, and then laugh later on when they show you the Ring camera footage of you hiding eggs in their front yard, those kinds of things. But I think it's a fun, exciting way to invite people to come to Easter, to have conversations with your neighbor, and really involving their kids to have a great time.
Yeah, you know? I hope you're thinking, I have a friend that I could do that too. Yeah. And they don't have to be your immediate neighbors. They could be somebody across town or whatever.
Yeah. I've got people in my neighborhood that I've like pigeonholed that I'm going to go after and be able to do it here in a few.
And you can do as many as you want. I think we've got 150 sets of stuff. So candy in the eggs all ready to go, and invitation to an Easter service ready to go. I think it's going to be a really cool thing. I'm going to do it with one of our neighbors, and not the ones that come to church, Jared and Lisa. I think that it's going to be really fun.
Yeah, it'll be fun driving around and seeing the signs a little bit too.
Yeah.
So, that'll be cool. Be looking forward to that. Hopefully you grab some of those on Sunday here coming up. Anything else you want to chat about?
I think that I kind of referenced this, but I think that everybody as they went home thought, I have never tasted anything like this.
Oh yeah.
That both the fish and the bread, it was really, really good.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Because the creator of the universe made it. So
taste and see.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Cool. We appreciate you guys joining us. Like, share, comment, all that good stuff. Pass it on to somebody who this could be encouraging for. And then we'll see you again on Sunday.